Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of In the Box. Kind of an emergency episode. We weren't sure if we were going to do this, but after the Rantanen deal went down and then the Brad Marchand deal went down at exactly like 3 p.m., we had to rapidly react. We could not wait until Saturday, Sunday. Babiak, how are we doing? This guy's fresh out of work, dedicated to the game.
I'm doing so good. I was refreshing r/hockey all day, pretending to do my real job. Got to stay updated on the happenings. I'm ready to go.
Yeah, dude. It started off slow. There really wasn't shit until like 11:30 with the Cozens and Norris deals. We're gonna talk about that deal: Rantanen, Marchand, Nelson, Walman, Gourde, Bjork, and then just talk about the overall like winners and losers of the trade deadline. Let's get into it. Mikko Rantanen heading to the Dallas Stars for Logan Stankoven, 2 first-round picks, 2026, 2027, and 2 third-round picks. I'll let you go first because I made a full YouTube video, and then I'll just bounce off you.
All right, yeah. I think that a lot of people are going to be really, really harsh about Carolina because the Rantanen experiment was a failure. And on one hand, yes, clearly it was a failure. On the other hand, I think the overall net value of this actually works out really good for Carolina. I think if you told Carolina in January or whenever the first trade was made, Martin Necas doesn't want to be here. He's not going to re-sign. So trade Necas and a bunch of B assets. They didn't give up any A prospects or first-round picks. Necas and B assets for Stankoven and 2 firsts. I think they would take that return and they'd be pretty happy with it. Mm-hmm. Now, the question is, does that make Carolina not really a contender anymore because they didn't do anything about it? Maybe it hurts them there. Yeah, I was kind of expecting the whole time, okay, you have 2 first-round picks. They're both pretty far out. Brock Besser, potentially, for a top 6 wing that you probably could get for a first-round pick and something to reroute what you get there. But I guess Stankoven is just going to fill in for the Rantanen spot. I like Stankoven a lot. I think there's a lot of potential there. There's quite a bit of talent, but, got to call it like it is, right? For this year, and Carolina's supposed to contend this year, that's a major, major downgrade.
Yeah, even Necas to Stankoven, even if you're not the biggest Necas guy, that's pretty sizable. I like you. I thought they were going to give one of the first round picks up for Brock Besser. You could have totally sold me on Besser, Stankoven in for Rantanen, and you still pick up an asset in a first round pick. But yeah, I think at this point, they're kind of punting on this season. The forward core, the second line center is a disaster. They don't really have much in their forward core. Aho, Jarvis, Svechnikov. Besides that, yeah, Stankoven in 2 to 3 years can maybe be Necas level, but that's just not the case right now. So yeah, I agree. The overall return is fine, and I like Stankoven a lot. Had him on the former podcast, my solo podcast that I did. Shout out Logan Stankoven. And he's going to have a really good career in Carolina. But this Carolina team, although they do have a very good prospect pool, they have some young impact guys. Like, some of their guys are starting to get up there in age. Aho's 27 or 28, now he's a 2015 guy, so 28. Slavin, although I really like the deal that he signed, he's 30 years old. You might only have another year or 2 left of this prime Jacob Slavin. It's still an unknown in net whether Kochekhov's going to really seize that number 1 goaltender. Freddie Anderson is their guy right now, most likely heading into the playoffs. So, yeah, I agree. It's not a disaster. I guess that this is a far, far better outcome than, say, if Rantanen just left in the offseason and they got nothing. But yeah, Stankoven potential is there. The first round picks really don't move me at all because it's Dallas. Like, that's the worst team to probably get a first round
Dallas
pick.
Is young too. Dallas's window is not shutting anytime soon. They'll be really good 3 years from now.
Yes, they'll be good even if it was a 2028, 2029. Like, their entire core for the most part is between the ages of 21 to 28. So yeah, it's okay, but if you're Eric Tulsky and you lose this year in the first or second round, you rightfully so are going to get a lot of criticism. From a Dallas perspective, yeah, they're the team to beat in the entire NHL at this point. I would say there's still definitely, did they need Mikko Rantanen? Would they ideally get an elite right-handed defenseman at this year's deadline? Yes, but as we've went over multiple times, we're going to talk about with the Edmonton Oilers, those guys are starting out there. Like the right side help just wasn't out there. And when you have the chance to trade for a Mikko Rantanen, when your prospect pool and you already have such a young core, you do that 9 times out of 10. You lock him up on an 8-year, $12 million extension, which is a decent amount. But we were talking about this guy potentially getting like 13 plus on the open market. Yeah, for Dallas, it's awesome. What do you think about it for Dallas?
I don't necessarily love it for Dallas. I don't not love it for Dallas. I feel like I was very hasty to say, oh, Rantanen to Carolina, absolute stud, perfect fit. He's so amazing. He'll be amazing without McKinnon. And I maybe overreacted there. Clearly, the fit wasn't great.
I was lower on it.
Does that necessarily mean that Rantanen's not an elite player without McKinnon? I wouldn't go that far. It's way too early to judge at the very least. But I think the right way to approach this from the Dallas end is more like cautious optimism and less, oh, this team's the favorite now. I already made that mistake once after a Rantanen trade this year. You're not going to get me on that again. But I do agree with you. The actual worst case scenario is Rantanen stays in Carolina, they get bounced in round 1 or round 2, and then he leaves as a free agent. So this is not the worst case scenario. Is it the best case? No, but frankly, if Rantanen's not going to re-sign and he's not going to be a great fit there was no best case scenario at that point. I mean, I saw the governor of North Carolina was
Taking
out
shots,
there
yeah.
tweeting that, if Rantanen's going to be in the playoffs the same way he's been for the last month, we're better off without him, which is, it's an exaggeration, but it's not like 100% untrue, right? The way Rantanen was playing with Carolina, he did not look like the kind of guy who was going to be able to elevate them.
Yeah, the contract. If it was a $13 million contract, I'd be a little bit more apprehensive from a Dallas Stars perspective if they made him one of the top highest paid guys compared to like Austin Matthews. $12 million, I think you can live with. I'd be shocked if he has some kind of Elias Pettersson, just completely looks like dog shit the rest of the season this year and this season as well. I think at worst he's a 40 goal, 90 point guy. You don't love that at $12 million, but you're perfectly fine with that considering Dallas is all in. Well, not all in, but they're going for it the next 2 to 3 years. And yeah, he's 28 years old. This isn't some kind of JT Miller move where he's 31 years old and you're worrying about the age regression already. Dallas is just like arguably the best run organization in the NHL. So I trust Jim Nill. And when looking at it, like he doesn't even need first round picks. He got Jason Robertson in the second round. He got Logan Stankoven in the second round, Wyatt Johnston and Ottinger in the late first round. So like they're still very promising. They still have some good prospects in Maverick Bjork, Leon Bichelle, Emil Hemming. They're going to be perfectly fine in terms of 5 years out. And right now, just go for it. Maybe they're not going to be able to re-sign Jamie Benn or Matt Duchene this summer as a result of this, because they obviously locked up Wyatt Johnston as well, which that deal I think we can agree is superb. But there might be some tough decisions this offseason, but you're fine with making those tough decisions if it means that Mikko Rantanen's on your team for the next 8 years.
I mean, this is easy for me to say because I have no actual emotional connection to the Dallas Stars. Roster management wise, letting Jamie Benn walk feels like an extremely easy decision.
Mm-hmm.
I understand he's been there his whole career, long-term captain. There's a lot of other factors that go into that, but purely assembling the most skill possible, I would not think twice about letting Jamie Benn leave. Although it's, you were just saying there, what the floor, the worst case for Rantanen is 40 goals, 90 points. No, clearly the floor is actually something lower than that because that's
games.
what he did in Carolina.
13 games.
I'm just saying.
If it was like 30 games, I could maybe get behind that.
I think that's like a pretty not ideal scenario.
Floor is 35
but you can't
goals,
say
85
the floor.
points.
The floor
that's
is
the floor.
The floor is what he looks like in Carolina is just how he's going to look without McKinnon.
I'd say 40 goals, 90 assists would be like, in terms of likelihood of like the worst
20th
case,
percentile outcome.
15th to 20. Obviously, the 0 percentile is like, yeah, he's actually a bum now. But yeah, I think most likely he's going to be fine. Going back to the Wyatt Johnson deal, 5 years, $8.4 million. I know this is a deadline talk, but these kind of go hand in hand because they made this deal as soon as the Rantanen one got finalized. Crazy value. And I was worried for Wyatt Johnson, and he should have fired his agent if this was an 8-year deal. That was the rumor. Cam Robinson said that they were offering 8 years. I think this is kind of a win-win for both. Obviously, like the market value, he's a restricted free agent, so he wasn't going to get like 5 years, 9.510, like we think that he's probably worth on a 5-year deal with the salary cap. But yeah, I like this. Far too early, far too many times we see these young guys go full 8 years and lock themselves up, and they're still making insane money. But I'm sure Jack Hughes and Tim Stützle would really enjoy if they took a 5-year deal at $7.5 million instead of their deals right now and cashed in early. So I think this is really good. It gets them to unrestricted free agency, and then in 2030, Jesus, He's going to cash the hell in and sign that 8-year, $14 million deal or something like that. And Dallas gets surplus value the next 5 years for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying the whole time since Jack Hughes signed his contract that he should be firing his agent because signing himself up for a 7x7 coming off of an injury year is the opposite of betting on yourself.
8x8.
It's taking the safe money when you had the potential to really break out. And Wyatt Johnston is betting on himself in the sense of 5 years is not the biggest commitment. It does walk him straight into the UFA spot with how high the salary cap might be 5 years from now. Yeah, like who even knows? Maybe like 12 mil is just the going rate for a number one center that many years away, and Johnston's going to be worth like 14 or something. It's impossible to tell exactly how much the cap's going up, but he's giving himself the space to take advantage of that.
Yeah, I think it's something that definitely will become more of a thing. Like Lane Hudson signing some 4 to 5 year deal instead of locking himself up fully. Because, yeah, if you want to maximize your earnings with the salary cap rising and if you don't have a full track record,
taking the short-term deals.
Yeah. And again, it is tough for some players like that don't come from much. You just want to take that guaranteed money. But still, 5-year deal at $6 million is going to pay you pretty well. Bet on yourself. You want to move on to the Brad Marchand deal, the biggest shock
Let's do it.
of the trade deadline. Yeah, 301 Friedman just set the world on fire by saying that he was heading to the Florida Panthers for a conditional second-round pick. The conditions on this, Bill Zito and like Don Sweeney were saying different things in their press conference. Sweeney was saying 25% of the playoff games he has to play. Zito was saying 50%. So it's one of those numbers. But if Brad Marchand's healthy, it becomes a first-round pick. I love it for Florida. I think it's like an A plus, just because like Brad Marchand is that veteran, ideal playoff performer. We've seen him rise to the occasion and playing on a potential line with Sam Bennett and Matthew Tkachuk is so perfect. And who gives a shit about a 2028 first round pick when you're Florida and your entire core is 27 to 31 years old? For Boston, considering it's most likely going to be a first round pick when it was a conditional second, my head went to like they got to make the cup final for it to switch or something like that. I don't hate it. Like, you got to realize that they were always going to respect Brad Marchand and send him where he wanted. I'm sure if they did some open bidding market on Brad Marchand, they'd get a first. They'd get an elite prospect, but he probably wasn't too keen on going to Winnipeg. So you had to respect your captain or else your franchise reputation would truly be in the dirt. So for Florida, amazing. They're probably now the favorites in the Eastern Conference like they've been. And for Boston, it's such a dark day by trading your captain and your longest tenured player. But I think overall for Boston, it's a step in the right direction instead of signing him to some 3x6.5 to either be a wild card team or barely miss the playoffs in the next 3 years.
I think Boston did fine for themselves here. My gut tells me that a healthy Brad Marchand could have got a bigger bidding war and that this injury is pretty bad, like possibly out for the rest of the regular season bad. So, on paper, I do love it for Florida, but it relies on, will Marchand be healthy? You'd hope so, but he's 37 or he's turning 37 this May, up there in years, injured right now. Matt Tkachuk is injured right now. He's supposed to be back in the playoffs, but there is some level of risk if you're really counting on two guys who right now aren't healthy to be healthy a month and a half from now. I do agree that Marchand Bennett Tkachuk line is extremely scary. That's the best combination of grit for like guys who can actually play good hockey in the entire league. I respect Boston for selling. It's not easy to do, but it was the right decision, I feel, given the injury situation with McAvoy and Lindholm, and it seemed like the tough move, but the correct one for sure.
Yeah, I think in total, I don't have it written down. I don't know why I just grabbed my paper like I do, but I think that they picked up we're calling this a first round pick. We're going to assume Marchand is healthy. 2 first round picks, a second round pick from the Frederick deal, Fraser Midden, and like a 4th round pick for Frederick, Carlo, and Brad Marchand. Also, the Justin Brazeau deal, but that was kind of smaller. That's a pretty solid haul for a potential retool. Like, they have the assets now to potentially trade for someone that is damn good and in the age range of Pasta, and McAvoy. So you gotta get yourself a bunch of ammo to make these kind of potential moves. I look at someone like a Nikolai Ehlers if they want to go out and try to sign him or something like that by moving the cap around. They needed to do something like this. Their team had grown so stale. And yeah, I think Don Sweeney's staying. I think that's the scary part of this, that he was allowed to trade Brad Marchand. That tells me that they trust him to navigate this kind of retool and rebuild, which, yeah, that's not good. He should definitely get fired. But I'd be optimistic if I was a Boston Bruins fan, because if they just stayed in place, yes, it would have been warm for Brad Marchand to retire as a Boston Bruin after 2 to 3 years. But again, you probably would have retired. His final game probably would have been when you're sitting at 84 points, eliminated from the playoffs, playing some bullshit. Think about the long-term vision, because McAvoy, Pasta, and Swayman, they're still between the ages of 26 to like 29. They still can make it work. They're going to have to somehow do something with some of their horrendous contracts like Lindholm and Zadorov. But after today, they have hope, I'd say.
Yeah, I want to emphasize this is a retool and not a rebuild. I genuinely believe Boston could be back in the playoffs next year.
Definitely.
If they make the right moves in the offseason. They don't need to tear it down. They don't need to tank. They just need to bring in, admittedly, bringing in 2 top 6 forwards in a season. Ideally, you get a real number 1 center. It's not the easiest thing in the world. It's easier said than done, but they could. They have assets. They're going to have a little bit of cap room to go after a pretty big signing. On Florida, one note that I want to make, because these trades aren't big enough on their own to talk about, but what the hell was Florida doing with their backup goalie circus? They had Chris Driedger, who's not great, on a league minimum contract to in theory be the backup after Spencer Knight, and they flip around and now they have Capo Kakinen and Vitek Vanešek, who are also not great goalies. Vanešek's cap hit is 3.4
He's
mil.
expiring. They got LTIR.
He is expiring, but it's fit. It's tough to fit. From what I was looking at earlier, I think actually even trying to play Marchand in the regular season would require either sending guys down to the AHL to run that bare minimum roster, or if someone else goes on LTIR. And that problem wouldn't exist if they just kept Chris Driedger instead of trading for Vanešek. That's what confuses me.
Yeah, that I didn't think about it like that, because although I'm sure Marchand's be practicing with the team, you're not building chemistry with guys by practicing with the team. You need real game reps, going to war with your boys. So yeah, I didn't think about that. For Florida, I guess they just wanted guys with like actual game action recently. Chris Driedger, has he played in the NHL like relatively recently? I know he got hurt when he went to like Seattle. It was like disaster. So yeah, more experienced guys. The fact they went after both, definitely weird. But yeah, overall, I think Florida, it's scary, man. The next 2 to 3 years, like they could easily win 3 Stanley Cups total with this core.
They could.
I'd set the line, like I'd say it's to get one in the next 3 years. I'd say it's like 50-50 at this point.
I'd agree with that. I think those are pretty decent odds for them to say. I do feel like they shortened their window this month by how aggressive they've been. Mm-hmm. But they did make their current team today look a lot stronger. I mean, it's way too early to judge Seth Jones, but so far it sure does look like, oh, hey, yeah, motivated Seth Jones is like a first pair quality guy who's elite on your second pair.
Yeah, the early 2030s for Florida, like there should be relocation. maybe not because they win multiple Stanley Cups and their fans stick around, but yeah, it's going to get really dark. You thought maybe like Lindell, Samoskevich, some first round picks could like carry them where it's like a leveling off after their run, but no, it's going to be like a nuclear rebuild.
It's going to be all in for about 2 or 3 years, and then some really rough years beyond then.
Yeah, definitely. Moving on to a team that's going through some rough years right now. Brock Nelson got traded to the Colorado Avalanche for a first-round pick, or it's going to be either 2026 or 2027. Callum Ritchie, as well as a conditional third-round pick if they win the Stanley Cup for Brock Nelson and William Dufour, who's just like an okay 22-year-old AHLer that's really nothing. I've gushed about this deal nonstop. Callum Ritchie, I still think is a top 50 prospect in the entire NHL. Didn't look great at World Juniors and has slowed down a little bit in the OHL, but has 67 points in 41 games. It's still ridiculous. Him and Beckett Seneca are a disgusting pair for the Oshawa Generals, I believe. I think that he has second-line center potential, maybe more so a playmaking third-line center, 6'3", great vision. And yeah, first-round pick from Colorado. They're not exactly a regular season wagon anymore. their first round pick this year, unless they make the Western Conference Finals, it's going to the Flyers, and it's going to be like 21st overall. They're in a wild card spot right now in like sub 60% points percentage. Not saying they're going to be that bad in 2026 or 2027, but it's not a Dallas Stars where like you can pencil it in being 24th or higher. So yeah, I really like this deal for the Islanders. It gives them ammunition to maybe pull off some kind of retool. I think they're not as set up as well as the Boston Bruins because they don't have a Pasta, McAvoy, Dobson's not as good as McAvoy. I would argue Sorokin's better than Swayman. But I think a retool probably is coming. If they can somehow get lucky with the draft lottery and get a top 2 pick, whether that's Michael Misa, Higgins, or Schaefer, a franchise player, and maybe pull off. Well, also this retool is kind of set that I planned out was set on them selling Paul Murray, which they didn't do. But yeah, they have a lot brighter future based on this instead of doing the rumored 3 by 7.5 that came out. I'm happy. I wish that they sold Paul Murray, but trading Nelson was far more important considering he had more value.
Yeah, first of all, I was wrong about Lou, and for your sake, I'm happy that I was. I genuinely did not expect Lou to sell. He did. Good for him. Good for the Islanders. That was the right move. They needed to sell. Man, that Brock Nelson contract this summer will be terrifying, won't it? Someone is about to give that guy
Minnesota.
like 4 years by $8 million on the open market, and that will get disgusting within a year and a half. I like the trade. I don't love it for the Islanders, but I do like it. I mean, I'm not nearly as high on Callum Ritchie as you are.
That's fair.
It was a total non-factor at the World Juniors.
Everybody on Canada was outside of like McKenna.
Hasn't played a whole lot in the NHL, very limited minutes, and he did score a goal against the Islanders earlier this year. But his NHL numbers, way too early to judge the guy on. Not
like
saying it
7
means
games.
he's a bust or anything, but he did get caved in the 8 NHL games that he's played.
That's fair.
He's looking good in the OHL. It doesn't really move me that someone this late after being drafted is good in the OHL. Like, that's kind of the expectation to me as a first-round pick, 20 years old. But, it's an asset. It's a solid asset. If you can get a legitimate 3C out of it, you're happy. The first-round pick, second liner, third liner, you're happy. It means more, I think, even than the assets, just like the direction here.
This year,
finally, someone in the Islanders organization is willing to say, let's look towards the future and not maximize our odds to be the number 8 seed and get 2 home playoff games this year.
Yeah, I tweeted it out. I thought it was going to be Casey Middlestat in like a second-round pick. I thought they were going to say like, oh, they're going to sell it. It's like, oh, we got a pick, and we stay competitive right now for a guy like Casey Middlestat that previously has been a 55 to 60-point guy, and that was going to make me absolutely lose it. So yeah, for the Islanders, I like it a lot. For the Avalanche, we can maybe dive into more of their overall deadline. They've gone crazy all in this year in terms of Nelson. They eventually traded Casey Middlestat for Charlie Coyle in a pretty weird deal. Ryan Lindgren, they're fully going for it. Chris McFarland, I guess, is nervous about his job security. I think this isolated deal, they gave up a lot, but Nelson is going to be that ideal second line center. They couldn't have gone in with Casey Middlestat. We saw how that went last year against the Dallas Stars. You give Brock Nelson actual more talent on that second line, the wingers that Colorado does have. I think he's going to be a monster. I think he's been one of the most underrated players. You said he shouldn't have been on Team USA, which I agree in hindsight, but like he should have been in consideration, rightfully so. But people are going to realize how good Brock Nelson is, and I'm excited for that. Gets reunited with Devon Tays, and hopefully the Colorado Avalanche win the cup, and I get my third-round pick, my Brock Nelson Stanley Cup.
I think any of you Avs fans watching should be hoping that I hate this, right? Because I hated the Blackwood ad. He's been fantastic there. I was not super high on the Natchez move from their perspective. Natchez has been incredible there. So I might as well say I don't love Brock Nelson and I'm not sure about this. Watch him score literally 20 goals in the last 20 games of the season. They did go very all in. Frankly, most of the players they got don't. Nelson's good, I think. Most of the players they got don't move me. I mean, Lindgren's just bad at hockey at this point.
Charlie Coyle was really
Charlie
weird.
Coyle as a 3C is like fine, I guess. Is he actually any better than Middlestat? Probably not.
Fits
but
the
maybe
role
Coyle.
more.
Yeah, maybe Coyle fits better
But
as
giving
a
up
3C.
a second, they got a fifth back, but giving up a second for that mid of a swap was kind of shocking.
It was a weird move. Yeah, I guess the logic there is, Charlie Coyle fits like a glove into a 3C defensive role, whereas just knocking Middlestat down the line up to the 3C, that's a weird fit.
Yeah, it provides a defensive black hole maybe on that third line center. But yeah, Colorado is fully going for it. Okay, moving on to our next deal. We got an Atlantic swap of second line centers here that have been struggling a decent amount. Dylan Cozens heading to the Ottawa Senators, as well as a 2026 first round pick heading to Buffalo. Josh Norris, as well as Jared Bednard-Docker, a 24-year-old right-handed defenseman. I've made a video on this. I think the Senators, I like it more for them. Cozens maybe struggles a decent amount, but no health concerns. Norris moving off him. There's just far too much risk with his shoulder. Do I think Cozens is going to be worth his deal? Probably not, but if you can get 82 games out of him and rehab him to a 50-point center, I think that cap hit doesn't look that bad considering it takes him between the ages of 23 to 29. It's not like you're going to have to deal with any real age regression. And he's going to have better wingers to play with in Ottawa. And you get a second round pick from a team that might stink next year when you don't have a first round pick this year or next. I think it's solid work by Steve Stais, especially on top of that, adding a guy like Fabian Zetterlund. I think that deal was really, really good. I like this for Ottawa. Moving off a potential landmine of an contract with Norris. There's just far too much risk. And yeah, that's where I'm at.
It's risky. It's weird to me and a little bit risky on both sides.
Definitely.
On Buffalo's end, I think, if Norris is healthy, I think he's a much better player than Cozens.
30, yeah.
Better goal scorer, more well-rounded defensively, more physical for sure.
Yeah, playing the body this year.
But yeah, he's one of the biggest going concerns in the league with his chronic injuries. That shoulder, who knows how well it'll hold up. And that's, for a team like Buffalo that's really not all that close to contending, that's probably more risk than I'd want to take on, right? If I'm Vegas or Winnipeg or Edmonton, forgetting about cap space for a second, those types of teams I can kind of see taking that risk. Like, okay, well, Norris is healthy like right now at this minute, so let's go all in this year, and if he gets hurt, we can LTIR him and do something completely different in the summer. That's something that would make sense to me as a strategy. Buffalo, I'm not really sure why they wanted that specific guy unless we really, really want to trade Cozens, and this was the best deal on the table.
Yeah, I think that might have been part of it. Like Cozens' thing, the rap on him is he just doesn't have that high of a work ethic. Doesn't look at times it looks like he doesn't give a shit out there. But I would still rather take that. I think a hard ass coach can fix that. An organization can fix that in terms of pumping a guy up with a change of scenery, compared to somebody that's one hit away from their shoulder, just being detached from their body, and then just being a chronic 30 to 40 game a season kind of guy. And again, even when Josh Norris has played the last 2 years, it's been 27 goal pace, 48 point pace. It hasn't even been that much better than Dylan Cozens the last 2 years.
No, you're right. He has not looked close to 100%, quite frankly, since that basically whole season injury. Even when he's been healthy since then, he has not been 100% of pre-injury Norris. And he really hasn't been all that healthy. This year has been relatively healthy for him. He's still missed chunks of games 2 separate times. Last year, he only played 50-some games.
I think 50 on the dot.
But it's also weird to me for Ottawa because Ottawa's a young team. They're tenuously holding on to a wild card spot, right? Ideally, they'd want to be in the playoffs this year. And I think this trade does make them a worse team for the next 2 months. So in that sense, It's a little bit strange. It kind of, to me, reduces their playoff odds. That said, I do also love the Zetterlund pickup.
Yeah,
they got him very cheap. He's young enough to fit their core. He's also a decent scorer, but a well-rounded wing, physical presence. Does stuff on both ends. That's a sneaky good pickup that definitely makes Ottawa better.
Yeah, that definitely offsets it. And with Cozens and Norris, the fact that Norris is 2 years older, he does make around $900,000. I know it's not massive differences, but that's just something that goes in Ottawa's direction. On top of, I forget what I was about to say. getting that second round pick. The second round pick. If it was just a straight swap, I'd probably give it like a B for both parties because again, Norris when he's healthy is just straight up better right now. But that second round pick, Buffalo should not be giving up second round picks right now.
It was weird to me that they had to give up a pick at all.
Yes,
to get this done.
I heard when it initially got announced there was going to be Cozens plus something going the other way. I assumed fourth round pick, maybe a third round pick, but that fourth round pick easily could be 39th. 40th overall next year, and that could easily be flipped at next year's deadline for a decently impacted guy for the Ottawa Senators. So from that perspective, just that second round pick really tips it in the direction of Ottawa get somebody that's going to be there for 82 games. The stat is he's missed like 3 or 4 games the last 3 seasons compared to Norris, who's missed has played like half the games. But I like this for Ottawa. It's outside the box thinking. And if you told me 24 hours ago, I thought that they would have to attach like a first-round pick just to dump Josh Norris, considering that shoulder injury was so concerning, and he makes a hefty $8 million.
It's just there's the downside though, right? Because the one way this could backfire is oh no, we literally lost out on a playoff spot because Cozens just isn't that great. That's a possible outcome of this.
But I wouldn't it's not like they're playoffs you want to make the playoffs, want the rebuild to be over, but it's not like that would be back-breaking if Columbus makes it over. As long as Dylan Cozens plays half decent, I think they'll be encouraged by this deal going into the offseason. And I think even if Norris turns it around, I'm not sure you have that much regret if you're the Ottawa Senators, because as we mentioned, it's not like it's just one season of him not looking like himself. It's been 2 full seasons. It's been a bunch of games missed over the last 2 seasons. I think 41 in total. So if Josh Norris turns it around, God bless him. But it wasn't working out. And same thing honestly goes for Buffalo to a degree. But again, Buffalo just has if he shreds his shoulder, Kevin Adams is going to look like a total idiot. There's far more predictable risk with predictable disaster level risk with Buffalo versus Ottawa. Try to rehab the player that was a monster when he was 21 years old and is 6'3" with a shit ton of skill. I mean, it's a bet I make.
The problem is just Buffalo can't develop anyone at all. Dumping Cozens this early into his career is a microcosm of a bigger issue where Buffalo has been really, really bad at developing players for a decade plus at this point. Jack Eichel's a literal can't miss guy. Other than that, most of the forwards they've taken in the first round over the last decade have been pretty underwhelming, or at least underwhelming in Buffalo.
Yeah, Sam Reinhart was an elite prospect. Alex Tuck was good before he got to Vegas. Was not as good as he is right now, but was trending.
He clearly showed the signs that with a bigger role he would break out, I feel.
Yeah, definitely. JJ Peterka, apparently, the one guy that actually they developed decently because he was 35th overall. Apparently they're trying to trade it. They didn't end up trading him for 10 minutes. He was a New York Ranger, which was horrifying thinking about if they somehow fleeced Kevin Adams, because if there's one guy I trust less than Chris Drury, it's Kevin Adams. But Buffalo's in a really weird spot. I think they're obviously going to be better next season, but probably not a playoff team unless they do something drastic. Meanwhile, Ottawa, I like this move a decent amount. Let's move on to Jake Walman heading to the Edmonton Oilers for a first-round pick, I believe. What's the full deal? You talk about it first, and I'll make sure I'm not butchering.
Yes, I got it.
You got it. All right.
It was a straight first rounder there.
First round, right? Yeah.
It's the only condition is what year the pick is going to end up being from Edmonton. I believe it could be 2026 or 2027. But it's a guaranteed first round pick. First and foremost, the loser of this trade is not either of the teams that made it. It's Steve Yzerman. Steve Yzerman paid a second-round pick to dump this guy 6 months ago, and now San Jose is getting a first-round pick for him. San Jose traded air for a first-round pick and a second-round pick. Detroit's asset management has been horrible. The Yzer plan, I don't know how any Detroit fan can have confidence in him right at this moment. I mean, it's a
bad deal.
It's in the context of everything, it's a hideous deal, right? He missed out potentially on a first-round pick by being very quick to cut loose. And Walman was pretty iffy last year, but the year before that, he was genuinely really good.
Yeah,
that's bad asset management for sure. Actually, looking at the deal in front of me, I love it for San Jose because, again, right, they give up basically nothing really getting a first round pick in, right? Did they give up anything to get Walman? No. Is Walman going to be part of their future? No. So it's all just gravy at that point. And the vibes on San Jose seem really good, right? Sometimes you look at these tanking teams that are losing on purpose and very young, and it seems like the vibes are bad. San Jose's vibes seem really great right now, right?
Yeah.
Full of young guys, exciting guys. Even when they're losing, they're playing fast, loose, high-scoring games. Edmonton, I like it okay. I don't love it. I don't really think Walman fills a huge need for them as an offensive defenseman.
Definitely.
I think Edmonton's clear need was some kind of a second line upgrade because Nugent Hopkins has not been great at all this year. But, maybe those guys weren't really out there.
At this point, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only problem I have with San Jose is, I said it multiple times, I think they should have kept them at least till next deadline. They would have had retention spots. They would have had retention spots as long as he didn't fall off a cliff or get hurt. They also would have got a first-round pick. We talked about it with Granlund, and you agreed with me on this, that they maybe should re-sign him.
I agreed with you on that one. It's just
who is their number one defenseman now? It's
Mario Ferraro, which is a really bad
Yes.
spot to be in. I'm just thinking, with how intense of a seller's market it ended up being this year,
I think
you
Walman
cannot
still
afford to wait on that because there's a really good chance
if
next year won't be a seller's market this bad.
I still think Walman next year, half retained at $1.7 million, gets you a first. As long as he's putting up similar results, not even as good as results as he's putting up right now at half retained, or even in this summer. You would have kept him to the deadline. I think that is important to a degree. Again, I've said it. People are going to take that as hate. The overall Jake Walman experience, masterclass by Mike Grier. But yeah, I'm concerned now for San Jose. Maybe they'll do something in the offseason. But again, are they going to tie themselves down to some dumb defenseman contract? That's my concern. To kind of fill that void, they give someone a 5x5, and by year 1.5, that's a dog shit deal. You could have just kept Walman. I think you would have still got the same return. And now you get a first, but it's from Edmonton. And even though Edmonton's not playing good right now, I think we could agree that's not Dallas level. But I'd rather have Colorado's than Edmonton's 2026 or 2027. So it's fine. I hope that they flip that pick potentially to bring someone in maybe to fill that void. I don't think that they need a 2026, especially if it's 2027. By then, San Jose should be trying to come out of their rebuild. They're not going to need the 27th overall pick. So yeah, I don't fully love it. The isolated deal for San Jose too much, just because the defense core is so dog shit, and the vibes moving off Granlund and Walman is going to really hurt this team in the final 20 games, and unless they bring in some guys on 1 to 2 year deals, maybe overpay for that, next season's also going to be very, very rough.
They're definitely not going to be good next season. I don't think they'll improve much, if at all. But this does give a chance to get the young guys in the lineup potentially, which, spread the minutes around.
Sam Dickinson.
We can go back and forth on, are these guys ready? Are they being rushed? Because on one hand, you have a team like Chicago that's rushed some guys and they haven't played well in the NHL and then get sent back down, and it's kind of messy. On the other side, you have a team like Anaheim who has, 3 or 4 young defensemen with very high upside, and one of them is always scratched every night because the lineup needs room for Jacob Trouba.
Dumoulin's out now, though.
Dumoulin is out.
That might be,
so
that might be the best deal
up.
at the deadline for a seller. A second round pick for Dumoulin. Yeah, it's just with San Jose, unless they get a Matthew Schaefer who might be ready to go right out of the draft. I don't think Sam Dickinson's NHL ready next year. They have Luca Cagnoni. Probably not. He's an undersized guy. He won't be ready to go next year. Leo Salin Wallenius is over in Sweden. He's a 2024 draftee that I like a lot, but not ready to go. Like, they don't.
Muka Madulin, a first pair guy.
He might be ready to go. First pair guy, throwing him at the first pair.
You might have to, given that.
That's what I'm saying.
Start.
You should have kept Jake Walman. Dude. But again, I can't be mad. It's not like I'm saying it's a B- or C+, and not having Jake Walman as your number one defenseman is going to ruin your entire rebuild. But yeah, I think San Jose should have kept them. And honestly, if there was a 3 to 4 year deal that he was willing to accept that $5-ish million, I probably would have done that as well instead of the first round pick. I know that might be crazy, but they already have such an elite young core that I think I maybe would have prioritized having a veteran guy that is good and again, if you wanted a 5, 6, 7 year deal like he's entitled to, then cut him loose. But if he was ready to take somewhat of a team-friendly deal.
I just feel like it's such a seller's market, especially on the defensive end at this deadline. I can totally see a situation where you trade literally this exact same first-round pick in the summer for a better defenseman than Walman. I think that's possible just because maybe it won't be such an intense seller's market. One quick note on Edmonton before we transition to the next one. I love that they're using the Tampa Brisebois strategy of specifically not renting and intentionally going for guys that they can get for 2 playoff runs.
3.4.
That's smart.
Yeah, he's very team friendly. That's also, again, I think they would get a first round pick next year. But yeah, it's smart. I didn't even talk about the Edmonton side of this. Not the great fit, but him as your third pair left-handed defenseman is awesome, and Ekholm is starting to get up there in age. It's not like he's going to be at this elite level for much longer, so if Walman's a part of your long-term plans, maybe you sign him some kind of extension. Moving on, speaking of the Tampa Bay model, good segue, much better than mine. Like, you want to talk about this? That was smooth. Yanni Gourde and Bjorkstrand heading to Tampa Bay. Gourde heading back to Tampa Bay for 2 first-round picks in 2026, 2027, and a Toronto 2025 second. I believe there's some other parts of that, but I don't have it written down. That's the meat and that's the main part of it. For Tampa Bay, definitely a little bit of an overpayment, but as we mentioned, Bjorkstrand does have another year at a hefty $5.4 million, which he's worth, but not exactly like steal like a Jake Walman per se, as well as Gourde at double retained is dirt cheap. So yeah, for Tampa Bay, they're fully going for it the next 2 to 3 years. They have an even shorter window than Florida, who has some of their young players or star players still at like 27, 28 years old. Tampa's a little bit older. Their defense core is really, really old with Hedman and McDonough. So yeah, I'm all for it. I don't think that this is some galaxy brain upside that a Brandon Hagel trade had, but it's a solid move. They're going for it.
I am happy to give both teams an A on this one.
Yeah.
I love the way Brisebois refuses to sign in rentals and only targets players who have 2 playoff runs left.
Gourde is a rental, I believe. I'm good. Keep on going.
You're good? No.
Yeah.
I mean, Bjorkstrand's the meat and bones of it, though. They get him for 2 playoff runs. Bjorkstrand's a really good player. He was good in Columbus. He was good in Seattle. All-star last year.
Seattle got him for like a third and a fourth.
I hated that trade when it happened. Columbus sold very low on him, confusingly.
That was nuts.
But yeah, it worked for Blake Coleman. It worked for Barclay Goodrow. Bjorkstrand is a better player than both of those, I feel. You were talking early. I do think that right now.
No. I agree with you. In fairness, Barclay Goodrow had a year and a half at $950,000.
Very different cap situation. Even Coleman was under $2 million. I understand that, but Bjorkstrand's a better player there. You pointed out in our last episode how Tampa, of any of the real contenders, maybe had the biggest difference between their top 6 and their bottom 6. Boom, you added a great defensive 3C, and he's on their third line now with Gourde, but like Bjorkstrand's like a solid second line quality player who's now on your third line. So I love this for them. Great ads. Gourde knows the system. He can be a good shutdown guy. And I love this for Seattle because I was not expecting Seattle to sell a non-rental like Bjorkstrand.
Yes.
And they did, and they got a haul for it. You've been so critical. We've both been critical of Ron Francis, but good for him for looking at the team this year, saying it's not going to happen this year. It's probably not going to happen next year. Bjorkstrand's trade value, if we do this now, is insane. Mm-hmm. Let's pull the trigger. Love it for both sides.
Yeah, and especially with the turn that they got, and they didn't even have to retain on Bjorkstrand, who's making $5.4 million, which is very, very impressive. Jared McCann, they could trade in the summer and still get an absolute haul. I don't think that's like a necessity. He has 2 years left, at $5 million. Great for Seattle. Great for Seattle. And with these Tampa Bay picks, they're not for sure. Like, they're even less valuable than the Edmonton, Colorado, or more valuable than the Edmonton, Colorado, and Dallas picks because the prior 2 years, Tampa was a wild card team. The Chicago picked 18th and 20th with said picks. So yeah, they could definitely be valuable. They also get the second round pick from Toronto. No reason to re-sign Yanni Gourde. I was a little bit tough on Tampa Bay. I think I give him a B-. I'd probably give him a B, maybe even a B+ at this point, especially now with the market that we have seen further develop. But yeah, Tampa going for it, my Eastern Conference pick. I'm feeling confident in that, even with Florida also adding Brad Marchand. Getting that number 1 seed in getting the Atlantic Division is going to be huge because Toronto also made some big deals that we're not going to dive into. But I think they overpaid a little bit for Carlo. Lauden's about fair considering he has term. Both of them have term. But yeah, the Atlantic Division is going to be war, and Tampa Bay is fully gearing up, rightfully so, for that war.
I know we're not going to talk too much about Toronto specific
We
trades.
can talk about it. We can talk about it.
Yeah, I just want to say that
no rules.
I just want to say that I agree with your quick judgment there of Toronto.
It's a lot.
That the Lawton trade is fine. It's about what I expected. He's a perfectly fine 3C on a pretty good contract with term, so that's fine.
1.5 million.
I agree that the Carlo trade is a pretty bad overpay. I understand that basically everyone who got a defenseman this week made a pretty bad overpay, but that was a pretty bad overpay from Toronto. Definitely those ads do not move me nearly as much as what Florida and Tampa have done.
Oh, yeah, by far. Yeah. Toronto got depth and paid a sizable amount. Their number 2 prospect, 2 first-round picks. The Russian that they traded is still only 21, 22 years old and was productive in the KHL. Last year, got some NHL games. Yeah, Toronto, you had to do something, but they are pretty like quintessential Brad Treliving, physical guys, playoff style guys.
But I don't trust that. When has Treliving ever actually had playoff success?
No, I'm saying he overpaid, and I'm saying that it's probably not going to work out. But at least he did something. Like I kind of expected him to maybe do another like Joel Edmondson for a 3rd round pick, get like an objectively bad playoff style guy like he did last year. So they did address their needs. But yeah, I think even before the trades, like I would have picked Tampa and Florida over Toronto just because they're just so much more successful and rise to the occasion. But even with Toronto's deals, I'm feeling more confident in Tampa or Florida to take care of them. So Toronto like really needs to win and I think they are first right now in the Atlantic. They need to be going balls to the wall to get a Ottawa or a Columbus, New York in that first round, or else they're probably going to have a really disappointing first round exit. Do you think that this at all leans towards them being this aggressive that they think Marner is leaving or Tavares is leaving? Like they're gonna let one of them walk. See how it goes, and then
I think letting Tavares walk if he's not going to take a hometown discount is just like the right move in general.
I think he will. Imagine
like take a discount. You mean?
Yes. Like, dude, his legacy if he spent 7 years in Toronto, won one playoff series, and then like signs a 6x6 somewhere else to just go fuck off. Like that would be.
I would not give Tavares 6 years right now.
I'm saying, I'm saying to go fuck off in like Seattle, or we were just kind to Seattle. That was an unnecessary shot. Calgary or something like that. But yeah, like I think he's gonna stay. I think he's gonna retire a Maple Leaf because he realizes like I have to go down with the ship. Marner, on the other hand, I think I wouldn't hate Treliving if he says if they go like this aggressive, like I gave you the depth, go on a deep run. Mitch Marner, if you don't perform, like we're not giving you 12. Also, Mitch Marner took a little bit of a dip by Rantanen signing that extension. If he's like, Marner, I'm not giving you this insane amount of money considering you didn't rise to the occasion where when you did have a team that is capable of winning a Stanley Cup. I think the Toronto Maple Leafs, although still clearly lack a number 1 defenseman or even like a number 2 defenseman, like a 2-way number 2 when you look at the recent guys, their defense core is fine overall, but they're good enough to go on a deep run, and if Marner shits his pants, maybe just let him walk.
Yeah, I mean, Marner's having a career regular season right now, so he better be following that up with career playoffs, right? Historically has not shown up very well in the playoffs. There's kind of 2 sides of the coin, I guess, as far as what his contract's going to look like, right? 'Cause on one side, you can say Rantanen signed 12 mil, that's your comparison. On the other hand, you can say, well, maybe we thought there were going to be 2 legitimate superstars in free agency this year. Now there's just the one. There's only the one guy for teams to bid for. And that could end up, if he goes to open market, that could drive up his price. And I don't think that would affect how Toronto pays for him. If he goes to open market and has Utah and Chicago bid against each other, that could end up being a much higher number than people think.
Yeah, and also you're going to hear the state tax argument, and in fairness, it does affect it to some degree that it's not $12 million in Dallas is not exactly the same in Toronto. But yeah, it's a good point with the one clear UFA. If you're a Nikolai Ehlers, you're begging that Mitch Marner signs because then he becomes like the top guy, and then he can get an absolute bag. We'll probably do a free agency preview at some point because
for sure.
I think at this point, usually past the deadline, the guys that are unsigned aren't going to sign until after the playoffs. Like they're not going to, at this point, contract negotiations kind of shut down until they see what happens within the playoffs. Okay, so now we are going to be giving out our biggest winner of the deadline, one like sneaky winner, our biggest loser, and then our like sneaky loser of the deadline. You want to go first with the biggest winner?
I will, yeah. Everyone who sold is a winner, but Seattle is the biggest winner, I would say. It's so much sexier to pick a buying team as the winner and be like, oh, look at all these guys that they brought in. But like I said, I genuinely was not expecting Ron Francis to sell on a legitimately very good player who's not on an expiring contract. He did sell. He sold extremely high. It doesn't feel like this season should be Oliver Bjorkstrand's peak value, but given how insane the market was, this probably was his peak value, right? I don't think you're getting 2 firsts for him this summer. I don't see that happening because there's just so much less incentive there.
It was somewhat of a combining of the two.
Combined offer.
Like Gourde was a little bit more than a second round pick, but yes, I agree.
If you're paying a first round pick for an expiring Yanni Gourde, then you're also a winner for selling on that
fair,
one.
That's fair. Yeah, definitely. My biggest winner, although I didn't glaze the Seth Jones trade, I still think the Florida Panthers are the biggest one in terms of, as we mentioned, maximizing their next 3 to 4 years with Seth Jones, bringing in Brad Marchand for only a first round pick this year. They are yet again a complete wagon. And with Seth Jones, as long as Bobrovsky can hold up for another 2 to 3 years, they're probably, them and Dallas are going to be co-cup favorites, where we maybe had some concern if they were going to sign Ekblad to some egregious deal and be screwed in terms of their defenseman depth. I think they're really, just Bill Zito just knows how to operate this team, and as a result, they're my biggest winner. Who's your sneaky winner?
My sneaky winner is also a seller. I loved what Kyle Dubas did today. It's sneaky because he didn't get a first round pick this week, but like he didn't have the assets to get first round picks, right? We've talked about this a couple times on the pod throughout the season. Pittsburgh should be a seller, but they really don't have any assets worth selling after Marcus Pettersson's gone. And Dubas said, like, that's fine. I don't care. I'll just sell off the useless pieces.
Yeah.
Luke Shen, Cody Glass, Anthony Beauvillier. There is no reason that Pittsburgh should have got value for any of those guys.
What was like do you have like the total haul? It had to have been like 2 seconds,
yeah,
3
Luke Shen got a second, Cody Glass got a third, Beauvillier got a third.
And he only got Shen from the bunting for Novak
deal,
yeah.
But I think Novak was a better player than Bunting anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, it's maybe not a single pick that Dubas got this week is going to turn into a significant NHL player. That's totally possible. That lines up with the odds on second and third round picks. But like the amount of just like AHL tier junk that he was able to flip into seconds and thirds, I gotta respect it.
Yeah, my sneaky winner is someone that didn't really buy. I'm gonna go with the Washington Capitals. I know that they're isolated deal. I don't like Beauvillier for a second round pick, but when we look at a team last year that was completely unsustainable and fluky, had an out the wazoo PDO in the Vancouver Canucks, and they went buy, got Zadorov, got Lindholm, gave up a shit ton to get Lindholm. The fact that Chris Patrick was just like, I'm gonna ride it out. He thinks that his team can maybe go on a run, but like this isn't our year. The future is so bright. We're not gonna dip into our assets in terms of first round picks. We're not gonna trade a Tarek Parasak, obviously not Cole Hudson or Ryan Leonard, but Andrew Crystal, Ilya Protas. We're not gonna do something wild like that. We're just gonna let it run our course, see if we go on some kind of run, and then maybe next year come back and be ultra aggressive, and then our window really opens. But yeah, I think, especially we saw what the Atlantic teams do, I think Chris Patrick just sat back and is just going to evaluate. The timeline is so big with this team that I really like them not being ultra aggressive. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree with you. And I mean, like you said, looking at the rest of the division, I mean, the Devils made, the same like half-hearted buys on bad deals. They're probably a worse team than Washington when you factor in Hughes.
They could have easily tricked themselves into, because of the Jack Hughes injury, because of the Rantanen smoke, to buy. But I like how he stayed put. Pretty simple.
Yeah, I think Washington is firmly in the second tier of contenders still. I cannot put them in the top tier. I just kind of don't believe that Logan Thompson's going to be the best goalie in the NHL forever. I think their 1 seed is smoke to an extent, but, they're very much the second tier of contenders is not a bad place to be, especially when your team, like you said, it's pretty young. There's no major expiring contract because we're assuming, right, Ovechkin's going to be there forever.
And also there was no like pressing need. So if they did buy, if they forced themselves into buying, it probably would have been something. They would have had to either move down a player from the top 6 into the third line, or that player would have had to play on the third line. Beauvillier actually does have really strong underlying numbers. So like in their it's this year's second round pick, I believe. So that pick's at the earliest going to be 59th overall. So it's not that valuable of a pick. So yeah, a sneaky win. Again, not the sexiest, but it's more so what they didn't do when we've seen prior teams that had these fluky runs go so aggressive. I love that Chris Patrick kind of sat back and just said, I trust my guys, and then we're going to reevaluate. Who's your biggest loser?
It's Vancouver by like 1,000 miles. I wish I could have come up with a more creative answer, but Vancouver botched this. I mean, they did nothing, right? This week, they did nothing.
Yeah,
we didn't buy, we didn't sell.
So now Suter rumors, but then those fell apart.
So now all you have to show for this deadline, this trade function, is we threw away a first-round pick. The Rangers won this year, very well might convey number 15, 16, 17, somewhere in that range, and that's not protected that low in the middle of the first rounds. Mm-hmm. All Vancouver did trade-wise was we shipped out a first-round pick for a rental Marcus Pettersson in a lost season. That's what happened here. Could they have bought to maybe actually do something that maybe wouldn't have been wise, but they could have, and they chose not to? Could they have sold on a guy like Brock Besser, get more than a first-round pick, you would think? They could have probably, and just taken the L on this season. They could have even tried to reflip Marcus Pettersson, right? Do a Rantanen situation with Pettersson. If we're like, hey, we're probably not going to make the playoffs this year. Pettersson's right-handed, decent defenseman. He's going to be worth a first-rounder to someone. Yeah. They did nothing, and this was a horrendous season of asset management. Even by the end of the season in the summer, Elias Pettersson will not have half the trade value he had last summer.
It's bad.
Just horrendous asset management from Vancouver this year.
Yeah, I agree. They're definitely within my top 3 of the biggest losers. They were on the post of my Instagram. For my biggest loser, and again, it's kind of contradictory, I guess, to say, because this team didn't buy, and I've been saying that the seller's market teams are getting a little bit overpaying and so on. But I'm going with the LA Kings just because their only move was still giving up a third-round pick for Andrei Kuzmenko, who's not very good. But LA is that one team that has nothing to show for the last 3 seasons, continuously losing in the first round. And they're probably going to lose in the first round yet again. I don't know how they have attachments to like first-round picks. Why are you not trading first-round picks? They have a bunch of very good young roster players on top of a very good prospect in Liam Greentree already. The fact that they did nada, squatch, zero. The fact that they couldn't attempt, I didn't even hear them trying to put together a package for Mikko Rantanen. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous what Rob Blake is doing. And also, maybe it's also they're like, man, ownership isn't letting him do it. They're just going to let it ride out and then fire him. If that happens, sure. But if Rob Blake, after yet again doing nothing at the deadline, continues to be the general manager of this team, I think that is such a slap in the face to LA Kings fans. And if I were them, I'd be feeling pretty bad right now. Because although it's not like Vegas went all in and Edmonton only made a Walman trade, but at least those teams did something. Like Vegas added Riley Smith and Brandon Saad. You added Andrei Kuzmenko, and you're already viewed as a team that just has inferior talent, top-end talent to those teams. It's yet again not going to happen for the LA Kings because of their just lackluster management.
Yeah, I mean, I'm I guess of 2 minds on that one, because on one hand, I do want to credit them, like you just said, for, the prices were ridiculous this year. Do I think LA is a serious contender right now? No. So in a way, good for them for not buying. Like, better to not buy than to go all in for rentals and then lose in the first round anyway. But you are right that this team seems destined for another first round loss, another year of no progress made. I agree, because both Vegas and Edmonton are already, like, their starting point much higher than LA's right now. Colorado got better. Dallas both had a higher starting point than LA and got better. Winnipeg has a higher starting point. I don't really see how this works out for LA. And with them keep taking these first round picks, they take them and then don't even play the guys, right? It took like 3 full years for Byfield to crack the lineup. Brand Clark is still struggling to crack the lineup. He's barely playing minutes when he does. So, they keep taking these picks and then stashing them for a weirdly long time in AHL purgatory, or riding the pine for the NHL team from the press box. I don't really see any kind of a long-term vision there. I think it's just like one by one, we want to make trades that we win, which makes sense in theory, but in real life, it's not a coherent vision.
Yeah, it looks especially bad when their big move this offseason, besides Kemper, which actually looked pretty solid, but also PLD's killing it, is like Tanner Jeannot for a second and a fourth round pick. That flew up in their face. Speaking of, you mentioned that, yeah, I agree. Unless they did some kind of Rantanen deal, they wouldn't have been favored to make it out of the Pacific Division. But it's not like they're this team that is between the ages, their core is solely 20-ish years old, mid-20s, late 20s, where they're going to have multiple cracks. If Kopitar and Doughty start regressing, this team might not be a playoff team with some of the teams that are coming up in the Western Conference. So they need to kind of capitalize. Kemper's 34 years old.
They do have the weirdest looking core in the league.
It's all over the place. Yeah. In their number one defenseman, clear-cut number one defenseman is 34 years old. Still their number one center is 37 years old. So yeah, they need to kind of be going for it, because not nuclear unless it's a guy like Rantanen, but to just do nothing, to just let Kopitar's final years being 5 first-round exits. It really sucks, because he's had some of the most impressive longevity in NHL history, and he hasn't had jack shit for playoff success as a result.
But it's weird, though, because they do have a lot of young pieces around them, though.
Yes,
a good chunk of that roster is decent players aged 22 to 26. Yeah. Byfield, Turcotte, Brand Clark, if he ever plays, will be good.
3
Jordan Spence, I'm a huge Jordan Spence fan. He's really good, I feel. But yeah, it doesn't really line up.
They haven't picked a lane, and as a result, there's going to be a first-round exit
purgatory.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
All right, who's your sneaky loser?
I'm so desperate to say Detroit here, but I've ragged on Detroit enough. I'm going to cheat a little bit and give you 2 here, right? Okay, so number 1.
Okay, now I got to go first. You might steal mine.
All right, go for it.
I'll go mine. I'm going with the Calgary Flames to not sell on Erasmus Anderson when we saw a guy like Jake Walman get a first-round pick. I think Rasmus Anderson would have gotten even more. Nazem Kadri, I think you probably could have somehow moved off that contract at this year's deadline with how desperate people were for a second-line center. I know that they're trying to make the playoffs, and I'm not but the return that you could have got for those guys would have been big. I think you would have got first-round picks for them. So to pass that up just to make the potential wild card, and I still don't think they are. I think Utah is going to make it based on, I said that a couple days ago. I still think that is going to be true. For them to do nothing, I think I would have preferred them to buy or something like that. Give up a second-round pick for maybe a younger guy that could have been a part of their core to a degree, which they did do with Farabee and Frost, but they're not exactly killing it. Calgary, they're just going to, I don't even know if they extend Rasmus Anderson on July 1st, that's going to be such a disaster. And Kadri, if he continues to regress, is going to become untradeable. When at this year's deadline, they probably could have done something.
I didn't have them on my list, but what you say makes sense there. I agree, honestly. Calgary feels like they could have been a good little buy team. If they were the ones sending out a third-round pick to Fabian Zetterlund, that would be you're doing a little thing to get your push for the 8 seed. I respect it.
Yeah, that would have been a perfect deal. But, and they could have traded Rasmus Anderson, Nazem Kadri, and then done something this offseason for guys that are younger. I'm not suggesting at this point they're not going to do some kind of nuclear teardown. But in
just
terms
a
of...
little push, yeah.
Yeah, again, the Rasmus Anderson 8x8 on July 1st is going to break Flames fandom. Who's your sneaky losers?
So my buying sneaky loser is Winnipeg. Not that their trades were necessarily awful, but Colorado got a lot better. Dallas got a lot better. Winnipeg got a bottom pair defenseman and a bottom line forward.
Yeah, for 2 seconds.
They burned second-round picks on guys who will not have an impact and will not matter in the playoffs. I feel pretty comfortable saying that right now, right? If Colorado has playoff success, Brock Nelson will probably be a big part of why. If Dallas has playoff success, I imagine Rantanen will probably be part of why. Even if Winnipeg wins the Stanley Cup this year and everything goes perfect, I don't see any scenario where Tanev or Shen
Might
are
be like
like
Lindgren,
the
where
reason
where
why.
he could cost them a game or two with big hits that turns out headhunting or something like that. It could be a disaster.
Yeah, so that's my buying sneaky loser, just because like what are these buys? Like doing nothing probably would have been better than burning picks on Tanev and Shen. My selling sneaky loser is the Philadelphia Flyers, because literally everyone else who sold this year, I feel like, got way more than expected value for their players, and Philly got exactly expected value for Scott Lawton. I mean, the way prices were going, I kind of, especially prices for guys with term, guys will give you 2 playoff runs. I was expecting more than
And Halfertain too, yeah.
more than they got for Scott Lawton.
I think, I forget his name, Grebekin can be something in your bottom 6, nothing special. So I think he has about the value of like an early 3rd round pick, I would say. But yeah, that's definitely fair. With them half retaining, I think they probably should have got a first, that guy, and a 3rd on top of that, maybe just a little bit more. Also, they probably should trade Ristolainen, just because he could yet again crash again and then have no value at $5.1 million. I would have liked to see that, but I don't hate them holding on to Ristolainen.
I don't hate it, but I do agree they should have traded him, right? Because Ristolainen's been so up and down throughout his career, right? Like, when did Philly trade for him from Buffalo? 3 or 4 years ago. At that point in time, he had trade value. Whether it was deserved or not, we can argue about, but he had the trade value then. 2 seasons ago, everyone's in unanimous agreement this is an awful player on a bad contract. He has 0 trade value. Right now, pendulum shifted back. Ristolainen has trade value again. Will he have trade value this time next year? Maybe not. He's absolutely one of those guys who I can see just having a terrible season and not having trade value next year.
Yeah, it might be something where they don't want to retain, and at $5.1 million, that's tough for 2 more seasons after. So in the summer, they could trade him. Again, the return might not be that good, but teams could fit him. Teams could make way for him in terms of expecting him to come. Scott Lawton, yeah, they definitely would have been like a top 3 loser if they just didn't trade Scott Lawton, considering he had a year left. So I wouldn't rag. And they did get a 3rd round pick for Andrei Kuzmenko, who
that was a good value.
Yeah,
for
but like,
that.
I get what you're saying, where they probably should have moved off guys, and the Lawton return didn't overwhelm you because they retained 50%.
Yeah, I don't think they literally lost that trade. Like, they needed to trade Lawton. They got decent value for him. It's just like relative to the packages that Seattle got and that Boston got, and that Chicago got for Seth Jones. There's another one. Chicago. What is Chicago doing? We didn't get to touch on this, but I want to touch on this real quick, because Donato both did not get traded and did not get extended. So I have no clue what the vision is here, but Chicago's one asset that easily could have got a 1st round pick this year, they're just going to sit on and let hit free agency, I guess.
They probably should have traded him. I guess maybe they think that like that right now nobody in the system is going to be an effective line mate. I don't even know if he's playing with Connor Bedard, but at least top power play for Connor Bedard. Like, they're not expecting to land a big fish this offseason. They were rumored for Mikko Rantanen. I never really believed that, but like, I guess they don't anticipate to bring in someone, so they're just going to run Ryan Donato Bedard next season. That's my only logical explanation, I guess.
They were buzzing this morning that they were looking to extend him, which I think extending Ryan Donato right now would be a terrible idea. But they didn't even do that. They didn't even extend him. They just sat on it.
Yeah. I think we went for like an hour. Crazy deadline. We'll probably do like an updated. I think next episode we'll do like predictions based on what happened at the deadline going forward. Thank you guys all for watching. Love you. See you in the next one. Peace.